If you want to know what it's like to almost lose your father, your husband, and every piece of security your father spent his entire life building, stay with me for a few minutes. My name is Hannah Parker. I'm 33, and this is the story of how everything I trusted turned into the very thing that almost destroyed me. It was a Wednesday afternoon, quiet calm, just the soft hum of the espresso machine in the small cafe I've been running for the past year. I was rinsing cups at the sink, thinking about picking up my little boy from preschool later. Then my phone lit up. The name on the screen made me blink. Vanessa. Vanessa isn't my mother. She became my stepmother 5 years ago when she married my dad. She's 42 now, 23 years younger than him, young enough to be his daughter. We've never been close, but we've kept things civil. I respected her as the woman my father chose, even if I didn't always understand what they truly had in common. Dad seemed happy, and that was enough for me. Back then, I swiped to answer. Her voice came out fast, shaky, almost panicked. Hannah, your dad. He's had a heart attack. They're taking him to St. Mary's. You need to come now. For a second, I just stood there, the words hitting me like a blow. My dad a heart attack. The ceramic cup slipped from my fingers and clinked into the sink. My chest felt tight, my hands suddenly useless as I fumbled for my keys. I must have dropped them twice before I could lock the cafe and run for my car. The drive to the hospital felt endless, though it couldn't have been more than 15 minutes. My thoughts kept looping. Dad, heart attack. Please let him be okay. When I pushed through the sliding doors, the sterile smell of disinfectant hit me. The white lights overhead were almost too bright. I hurried down the hallway toward the ICU, and then I saw him. Not my dad, Michael. Michael is my husband. 38 years old, a real estate agent with a flexible schedule. His dark coat hung open, hair a little messy like he'd rushed here. When he saw me, he stepped forward, quickly placing a hand on my shoulder. I just got here, he said quietly. He's stable for now. A few feet away, Vanessa stood clutching her handbag like it was the only thing holding her up. Her face was pale, tight. She nodded toward the ICU doors. I walked to the glass, and there he was, my father, Richard Parker. Lying still against the crisp white sheets, an oxygen tube under his nose. IV lines snaking from his arm. The steady beep of the heart monitor marking each second. His skin looked thinner somehow, paler. The doctor joined us, explaining that it was a mild heart attack. He was out of immediate danger, but with his heart condition and diabetes, he'd need at least a week here for monitoring and treatment adjustments. I nodded, but my eyes stayed fixed on him. And then, without warning, a memory rose up. I was 15 again, the night my mother died. Everything changed. Dad gave up his steady office job and took any work he could find just to keep me in school. I can still see him coming home late, his shirt collar frayed, hands rough from the day. He'd press a few bills into my palm and say, "Just study hard, Hannah. Let me worry about the rest." The sting in my eyes brought me back to the present. This was the man who had carried me through every storm. Now, it was my turn to protect him. In the hallway, Michael spoke softly. "Hannah, why don't you let me stay here during the day? You've got the cafe, our son. Vanessa's here too. We can take turns. That way, someone's always with your dad. It made perfect sense. He cared about my father, and Vanessa was family too. I felt a wave of gratitude, thinking how lucky I was to have a husband who would step in like this. I didn't know it then, but that single decision, letting them spend those hours by his side, was the first thread in a web I wouldn't even see, until it had already closed around me. At that moment, I thought I had everything under control. What I didn't know was that a noose had just been slipped around my neck, and with each passing day, it would pull tighter. I've never been the kind of person who looks for trouble, especially not in my own family. For most of my life, I've believed that if you trust people, really trust them, they'll honor that trust. And for a while, it seemed like I was right. After my father was admitted to the hospital, my days became a blur. The shop, my little boy, bills, making sure dinner was on the table. Michael and Vanessa had stepped in without me even asking. They took turns sitting by my father's bedside, updating me on every little change. Michael would text me every night. "He's resting now. Try to sleep early." Vanessa would send pictures, Dad with his eyes closed. A faint smile, the blanket tucked neatly under his chin. It made me feel safe, grateful, like maybe I didn't have to carry everything on my own. That morning, though, something was different. I woke up before sunrise with this restless energy I couldn't shake. I don't know why, but I wanted to see him. Not through a photo, not through someone else's update, but in person. I boiled chicken, added ginger the way he liked. Let the soup simmer until the kitchen filled with the smell of my childhood. While I ladled it into a thermos, I caught myself smiling, imagining the look on his face when I walked in unannounced. The hospital was quiet when I arrived. I pushed open the door to his room and froze. He was there, asleep, his face pale and thinner than I remembered. His chest rose and fell with slow, careful breaths. The machines beeped in a steady rhythm, a sound that both comforted and unsettled me. But Michael wasn't there. Vanessa wasn't there. I looked around the room. The chair by the bed was empty, no jacket slung over the back, no half-finished coffee cup, like Michael usually left. Even Vanessa's tote bag was gone. A nurse walked in, glancing at me with a polite smile. "Have you seen my husband or my stepmother?" I asked. "Oh," she said, checking the monitor. "They stepped out to meet someone. Should be back soon. Meet someone at this hour. Who could they possibly be meeting while Dad was here? Alone?" I brushed it off for now. I set the soup down and sat by the bed for a while, holding his hand, letting the warmth of his skin calm me. After a few minutes, I decided to get some coffee. As I stepped out of the elevator into the lobby, I heard my name, Hannah. It was Mark, my father's closest friend since before I was even born. He held a paper coffee cup, smiling like always. "I just saw Richard upstairs. You just got here." "Yes," I said, smiling back. "Brought him some soup. How have you been?" Still standing, he chuckled. Then his voice dropped slightly. "So you and your dad decided to sell the Maple Street property." "Already," I blinked. "Sell it? No. I haven't heard anything about that." Mark raised an eyebrow, lowering his voice even more. "Well, yesterday, Vanessa told me she needed to get it done quickly. Said Richard's health wasn't great, and it would be better to arrange things before it got worse. I just assumed you knew." I forced a small smile, but my stomach felt off. The Maple Street property wasn't just some random piece of land. It was valuable, and my father had always said he wanted to keep it in the family. So why would Vanessa? I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe she was just being cautious. Maybe she thought she was helping. But later that afternoon, while I was at my shop, my phone buzzed. A text from Linda, our old neighbor Hannah. Did you know Vanessa stopped by the real estate office yesterday? She said she was getting an appraisal on your dad's land. I stared at the message for a long time. 2 different people in the same day, both mentioning the same property. My father was still fully lucid. He could still make his own decisions, so why the rush? That night when Michael came home, he casually mentioned, "I'll be heading to the hospital later tomorrow morning. Got a meeting first." A meeting, I asked. "Yeah," he said with a faint smile. "Old acquaintance, nothing important." I didn't push. I didn't want to seem paranoid. But as I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, the thoughts wouldn't stop. Was it just a coincidence? Or was something happening behind my back? I didn't have answers, just a growing unease, and the sense that I needed to start paying attention to every little thing. For a day or two, I tried to talk myself down. Maybe Vanessa was just being practical. Maybe getting an appraisal while Dad was still in the hospital was efficient, even considerate. Maybe Michael's old acquaintance meeting had nothing to do with anything. I said maybe so many times that the word stopped meaning anything. When I arrived at the hospital that morning, the corridor air felt sharper than usual. That sterile antiseptic chill that seeps through your sleeves. Dad was drowsy from medication, breathing evenly, the crease between his brows finally smoothed out. Vanessa stood by the window, phone in hand screen, lighting her face. She looked up with a pleasant, almost rehearsed smile. "Hannah," she said softly. He slept well. I set my bag down. "Vanessa, can I ask you something?" Her thumb hovered above the screen. "Of course. The Maple Street property," I said, keeping my voice even. "Are you planning to sell it?" There was the slightest pause, half a heartbeat, maybe less, before she let out a light laugh. "Oh, that? No, I was just checking recent comps. You know how the market moves. It helps to know where things stand." But her gaze drifted just slightly toward the hallway before coming back to me. Just to know I asked. Just to know she repeated, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It never hurts to be prepared." Prepared for what? The question pressed against my lips, but I swallowed it, hearing my father's voice in my head. "Don't make trouble where there isn't any, kiddo." I nodded. "Okay, I was just curious." "Of course," she said again. "You should focus on your cafe. Let Michael and me handle the logistics here." We've got him. 3 simple words, but instead of comfort, they clung to my ribs like cold hands. The door opened. Michael stepped in with 2 coffees and a paper bag. "Look who snuck out of the cafe," he teased, holding up the bag. Bagels. Vanessa took one of the cups, their fingers almost not quite touching. It was nothing, absolutely nothing. I told myself that, and I tried to believe it. "How's he doing?" Michael asked, nodding toward my father. "Stable," Vanessa answered before I could. "Cardio will check on him at noon." Michael's voice softened when he turned to me. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Just wanted to see him before the lunch crowd hits." A brief pause, thin but heavy. Then Michael cleared his throat. "Did you bring the book your dad likes?" The war story's tomorrow, I said. I'll bring it tomorrow. When Dad drifted back to sleep, I got up to fill his water pitcher. Vanessa's cream tote sat on the chair by the wall, open just enough for me to glimpse the contents. Inside, a tabbed manila folder. On the corner, the printed logo of a local brokerage. Not Michael's firm, a different one. I didn't touch it. I just looked long enough for Vanessa to notice. She rose smoothly, placing her hand over the tote as if it were casual. "Do you want me to call the nurse for fresh ice?" she asked, her tone light. "I can do it," I said quickly, my voice too high, too brittle. Later in the hallway, I stepped aside to call the cafe. As I hung up, I caught Vanessa's voice around the corner, low and quick. "Yes, before he's discharged," she was saying. "No, it won't be a problem. He's tired in the afternoons. We'll keep it simple." A pause, then softer. "His daughter doesn't know." My skin went cold. His daughter, me. I froze, unwilling to be caught listening. Seconds later, she turned the corner smile already in place. "Everything okay at the cafe?" "Fine," I said. "Who were you talking to?" "An agent," she replied lightly. "Helping a friend with a condo sale. You know, forms upon forms." The days that followed blurred into a strange pattern. Morning text from Michael, heading to the hospital. An hour later from Vanessa, stepping out to pick something up for Richard. Then, nothing. Whenever I dropped by unannounced, they were gone. The nurse would say they'd stepped out to meet someone. If this was only real estate, why hide it? One afternoon, Dad was more alert. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't worry about me, kiddo. Just finish your day." On my way out, I spotted Michael at the far end of the hall, speaking with a man I didn't recognize. Vanessa stepped off the elevator moments later. The man handed her a long white envelope, the kind that feels heavy with contracts or checks. I walked forward. "Hey," I said, "everything okay?" 3 smiles appeared at once. "Just a client," Michael said. "Just forms," Vanessa added. "What forms?" I asked. "Insurance," Michael answered. "Appraisal," Vanessa said at the same time. They laughed, called it a mix-up. Then Michael amended appraisal paperwork for a friend. "Don't worry about it. Nothing to do with Richard," Vanessa promised. That night, after closing the cafe and putting my son to bed, I drove back to the hospital. I didn't go in. I sat in my car at the far end of the lot, looking at the pale gold light from Dad's window. What do I really know? A folder, a phone call, an envelope, 2 people whose stories never quite match, and one question I couldn't ignore anymore. Why is my husband positioned between me and the truth about my own father? I rested my forehead on my hand. "Add things up," I whispered. "Tomorrow." I stop waiting for someone to explain. Tomorrow. I start asking the questions that make people look away. And if the answers lead where I fear they will, I will keep going anyway, for him, for the life he built, for the truth I can no longer afford to ignore. After that night in the hospital parking lot, staring up at my father's window while the air tasted of dust and old coffee, something in me had shifted. I was done guessing, done waiting for someone to tell me, just enough to keep me quiet. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital earlier than usual, earlier than Michael or Vanessa would expect. I didn't go straight into Dad's room. Instead, I found a seat in the corridor just across from the elevator. a spot where I could see the hall without being seen too easily. It didn't take long. At 8:43, Michael stepped out of the room carrying a messenger bag. Vanessa followed seconds later, cream tote over her shoulder, a slim envelope in her hand. They didn't notice me. They headed toward the south exit, the same way I'd heard about before. I checked my watch, noted the time, and felt that prickle again, the one that told me this wasn't random. Later that morning, while getting coffee in the small hospital cafe, a nurse I'd chatted with before glanced toward the elevators. "They always go out around now," she said casually, as if talking about the weather. "Probably more paperwork." I smiled, nodded, and wrote her words down in my head. By that afternoon, I couldn't keep it all inside anymore. I texted Emily, my best friend since college, the one who helped me paint the cafe walls the week we opened, and asked if she had time to meet. She didn't even hesitate. Of course, we sat in the corner booth of a diner halfway between the hospital and my place. The smell of burnt coffee and frying bacon wrapped around us as I told her everything. The folder, the phone call, the disappearing acts, the two quick smiles. Emily listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned in, her eyes sharp. "Hun, this isn't nothing," she said quietly. "If it were me, I'd talk to a lawyer. And maybe hire a PI. You don't need to guess what they're doing. You need to know." Her words hit me like the first jolt of caffeine in the morning. Not pleasant, but necessary. Because she was right, I'd been letting doubt nibble at me instead of facing it head-on. 2 days later, I had my chance. I left the hospital with my coat zipped up and my bag slung across my body. But instead of heading to the parking lot, I slipped into a side street and doubled back. I trailed them from a distance, keeping far enough back to be just another face in the mid-morning shuffle. They walked straight into a glass-fronted office building. The nameplate by the door, a real estate firm, the same logo I'd seen on Vanessa's folder. My pulse was loud in my ears. I didn't follow them inside. I just stood across the street, pretending to scroll my phone, waiting. When they finally emerged, they didn't head straight back. They stopped just outside the door, speaking in low voices. I caught fragments. "Wait for the right moment. Sign before he comes home. Don't let her suspect." Heat rose in my face. I couldn't hear the rest, but I didn't need to. The shape of it was clear enough. That night, after my son was asleep and the cafe's books were balanced, I opened my planner. I began writing down every date, every time, every strange overlap in their schedules. And I remembered Emily's voice. "You don't need to guess. You need to know." By midnight, I had bookmarked 3 real estate attorneys' websites and saved the number of a private investigation agency 2 towns over. If they were orchestrating something behind my back, I would find out, and when I did, there would be no going back. The morning after I saved those phone numbers, I made the calls. No more hesitation, no more telling myself it could wait. The first was to a real estate attorney, someone known for being sharp, discreet, and impossible to fool. His office sat on the top floor of a narrow building downtown, all polished wood and shelves packed with legal volumes. I told him the short version, or at least the one that wouldn't make me sound unhinged, that my father was still in the hospital, that my stepmother, Vanessa, seemed unusually focused on the Maple Street property, that she kept making call about before he's discharged. That I'd seen folders from a brokerage that wasn't connected to my husband's firm. He listened without interrupting, his eyes steady on mine. If your father owns the Maple Street property, outright, he said at last, you need to find out if there's a power of attorney in place. If there is, and if your stepmother is named, she could make moves without you ever signing a thing. The words hit me like a cold wind. I realized I didn't even know whether such a document existed. Find out, he urged, and try to get copies of anything she's preparing. The sooner you see what's on the table, the better your chances of stopping it. It was all about her, at that point, Vanessa, the smiling, soft-spoken stepmother who had slid into my father's life so effortlessly, and who might now be sliding her name onto his deeds. I stepped back into the winter sunlight and made my second call, the private investigator. His office was 2 towns over. By the time I arrived, the sidewalks were slick with melting snow, the runoff cutting grimy paths toward the gutters. Inside, the air was stale, with a faint scent of old carpet and printer toner. The man behind the desk, tall gray hair jacket worn at the elbows, didn't bother with small talk. What do you need? Watched. I handed him my notebook. Times, dates, little maps of the hospital grounds. Notes of when Vanessa left and who she left with. Photos I'd managed to take without being noticed. Vanessa in her cream coat. Michael at her side. She's my stepmother, I said quietly. I think she's making moves on my father's property while he's too weak to stop her. I just need to know who she's meeting and why my husband keeps being there when she does. He scanned the notes, nodding slowly. I'll follow them for a week. Discreetly, you'll get photos, timestamps, locations. If they're up to something, we'll know. For the next few days, my life split in 2. By day, I ran the cafe, smiled at customers, restocked pastries. By night, I waited for updates from the PI, replaying every moment I'd seen between Michael and Vanessa. On the 3rd day, the investigator called. They've been to the same real estate office 3 times this week, he said. Sometimes together, sometimes arriving separately. Always meeting a man in his 60s, maybe the branch manager. They carry files in. They leave about an hour later. It should have only confirmed my fears about Vanessa, but then he added almost as an afterthought, your husband talks more than she does during those meetings. I froze. What do you mean he's not just tagging along? He's showing papers, pointing to pages. If I didn't know better, I'd think he was running point. That night, my phone lit up with the attorney's number. I've looked into the Maple Street property, he said. There's a draft contract in circulation. Your father's name is there, but so is Vanessa's, and the witness line. It has your husband's initials, not a signature yet, but it's close. I sat in the darkened cafe, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly too loud. For days, I'd been laser-focused on Vanessa, the stepmother I never fully trusted. But now, if Michael was in those rooms showing documents, adding his initials, was he helping her? Or was I just too ready to see betrayal in every shadow? When I got home, I stood at the kitchen counter, hands flat against the cool surface, breathing slowly. Then I opened my notebook to a fresh page and wrote, "Move before discharge." Because if I waited, if I kept giving them the benefit of the doubt, I might wake up to find everything my father worked for was gone. taken by my stepmother, with my husband's help. They had just stepped out. Michael with an easy back in a minute, Vanessa with a soft smile, and her phone already in her hand. The room finally belonged to quiet. Dad lay propped on 2 pillows, color better than yesterday, the monitor keeping time like a patient metronome. I pulled my chair close enough to feel the warmth of his breath. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady, "did you sign anything while you've been here?" He searched the last few days, eyes moving as if reading something I couldn't see, then a small nod. "Yeah," he said. "Vanessa brought some forms, said it would help with Bill's pharmacy, all that. Michael was here too. He told me it was standard, nothing to worry about." The word standard lodged under my ribs. "What kind of forms?" He exhaled a little embarrassed. "Authorization, letting her handle things for me. I was tired. She showed me where to sign, so I signed." He said it like signing for a package, like tapping agree without reading the terms. I smoothed the blanket twice. "Okay," I whispered. "Rest all right, I'll be right outside." I kissed his forehead. His skin was warm, familiar. It steadied me, and didn't. Out in the corridor, the light felt too clean, the air too thin. Authorization rattled in my head like a coin in a dryer. My phone vibrated. I didn't recognize the number for half a second. Then my stomach dropped the private investigator I'd hired 2 weeks ago, back when worry didn't have teeth yet. I answered. "Yes, Hannah," he said, voice low. "Careful, I've got something. You might want to sit before you look." "I'm fine," I lied. "What is it? I followed them again this morning," he said. "Your husband and Vanessa." A breath in my ear. "I'm texting you now." 2 images arrived, one after the other, slow as verdicts. The first, the corner booth of a quiet cafe 3 blocks from the hospital. Vanessa leaned in, smiling into Michael's shoulder. His hand rested on the small of her back. Not a brush, not a courtesy, a claim. The second, glass doors of a midtown hotel, noon light spilling like gold. Michael stepped out first, hair mussed jacket slung over one shoulder. Vanessa followed, sunglasses in her hand blouse, not quite crisp. They were not rushing, they were not careful, they were comfortable. For a heartbeat, my mind scrambled for stories, client meeting, conference room, wrong angle, wrong moment. And then the stories crumpled like wet paper. This wasn't business. This was betrayal, not a stranger's, mine. "Are you there?" the investigator asked. I realized I was holding my breath. "I'm here. I can get more," he said softly. "But this tells the story." "It does," I said, and it hurt to say it aloud. "Send timestamps. Keep watching." We hung up. The corridor tilted. I put a hand on the wall until the floor decided to stay still. Someone laughed near the nurse's station, a bright, ordinary sound from a world that wasn't splitting. The pictures didn't leave when I closed my eyes. They grew larger, sharper. They burned. And then the real began. The small things I had filed under nothing stood up and named themselves. The way their conversations snapped shut when I turned the corner, a half-second silence like a curtain. His old acquaintance meetings that never had names. Her airy laugh when I said Maple Street. Oh, that I was just checking comps, their synchronized errands, his text. Heading to the hospital early, hers an hour later. Stepping out to pick up something for Richard. And then both of them gone, the scent of her perfume lingering when I arrived. the 2 empty cups, his jacket thrown over the visitor chair. Evidence of presence without people. Why has he been here so much? Because he's helpful, I had told myself. Because he loves my father. Because he loves. I cut the sentence in half before it reached the wrong word. A nurse's voice slid out of memory, casual and kind. They're here more than some of our staff. We had both smiled. Now the line pried at a bruise. I stared at my phone again, the hotel doors, the curve of Michael's hand. The way Vanessa's body leaned toward him as if it had been doing so for a long time. Underneath the shock, something colder took shape. A knowledge I did not want and could not ignore. The papers in Dad's room were not floating alone. They were tied to hands, 2 hands that moved together. I walked toward the elevator, then changed my mind and took the stairs because my legs needed something to do. In the lobby, the automatic doors sighed open and the winter air bit my throat. I kept moving until the parking lot opened wide and empty around me. The phone buzzed again. The investigator's voice was gentler now. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'll keep a respectful distance unless you tell me otherwise. If you want formal statements, times, places, I have them. Send everything I said." My voice surprised me, flat low like it had put on armor. "And if you can capture any titles on the folders they carry, do it." "I'll try," he said. "They're coordinated." Coordinated, that word scraped going down. I sat in the car and let my forehead rest on the steering wheel. For a moment, I was 15. The front door opening on the scent of metal and soap. Dad's collar frayed his hands rough and warm as he pressed crumpled bills into my palm. "Study," he'd say. "Let me worry about the rest." He had signed because he trusted, because the people in his room smiled and said standard. I lifted my head. This was not only an affair, it was a plan made easier by a pen in a tired hand. I remembered the manila folder with the wrong brokerage logo, the long white envelope in the hallway, the low call around the corner before he's discharged. His daughter doesn't know. Of course she didn't. That was the point. I swallowed hard, the taste of metal still there. In the glass of the windshield, I could see the hospital windows, small squares of pale gold stacked against a winter sky. Behind one of them, my father slept, certain that the people he loved were holding the line. They had crossed it, together. I closed my eyes and let the hurt rise until it became something else, sharper, steadier with edges. No more maybe. No more waiting to be told. I texted the investigator to keep going. I saved the photos in 3 different places because the thought of losing them felt like losing my proof that the world had tilted. Then I breathed in, holed out the way the nurse had shown me on night 2. My hands steadied. I was not done. They could have their secrets, their hotel light, their careful lies. I had a father who once worked 2 jobs so I could learn to read every word on a page. I would read this page. I would find the title on the document they handed him. I would learn exactly what authorization meant in their mouths. And when the moment came, I would put my body in the doorway of whatever they were trying to move. For him, for the house he built and the life he thought was safe in our hands, for the part of me that refuses to be the last to know. I thought I was prepared for bad news, but nothing could have prepared me for the call I got that afternoon. It was from Lisa, an old acquaintance who worked at a different brokerage. Her voice was hesitant, like she wasn't sure she should be telling me this at all. "Hannah, I just saw the transfer records for the Maple Street property. It closed yesterday. The sellers were listed as Richard's legal representatives, a woman named Vanessa, and a Michael." For a second, I couldn't even answer. My hand went cold around the phone. The hum of the cafe faded into static. They sold it?" I asked, my voice coming out thinner than I wanted. Lisa sighed. "I thought you knew. I figured you approved it. But your name's nowhere on the file." When I hung up, my pulse was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Every suspicion, every uneasy glance, every whispered phone call suddenly felt like it had been leading here. The sale wasn't just a possibility anymore, it had already happened. That evening, I walked into our house and found Michael in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone like it was any other Tuesday. He looked up, smiled faintly, until he saw my face. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting the phone down. "I didn't waste time." "They sold Maple Street," I said flatly. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he shrugged, actually shrugged, and said, I didn't know they'd finalize it so fast. Vanessa just asked me to sign some things, you know." As a witness, I cut him off. "Don't. I've had a private investigator following you two for weeks. I have photos, Michael. I have recordings. I know about the meetings, the envelopes, the afternoons you stepped out from the hospital together." His jaw tightened. He tried to look indignant, but the color drained from his face. "I was in debt," he muttered finally. "Business went bad last year. Vanessa said she could help if I cooperated. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Hannah, please stop." My voice shook, but not from weakness. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed my father. You stood beside her while she sold the roof over his head." He reached for me, but I stepped back. Whatever he wanted to say, I didn't care anymore. That night, I sat in a dim office across from my attorney, sliding the folder of evidence across her desk. She listened without interrupting, flipping through the PI's photos. The call transcripts, the copy of the sale record with Michael and Vanessa's names side by side. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "We need to move now. File for an emergency injunction to void the sale before the deed transfer is fully processed. And Hannah will be naming them both in the fraud claim." Her certainty was like oxygen. For the first time in days, I felt my hands stop trembling. We drafted the petition right there, filling the room with the scratch of pens, the soft click of her keyboard. The plan was simple: file in the morning serve. Both of them by noon push for an urgent hearing before the week was out. By the time we wrapped up, it was nearly dawn. The city outside was still dark, a few street lamps throwing pale circles onto wet pavement. I stepped out of the building with the folder pressed to my chest, the air sharp in my lungs. I was exhausted beyond exhausted, but there was a new kind of clarity in me. They thought they had already won. They thought the house was theirs. The papers signed the deal untouchable. They were wrong. Tomorrow we would go to court, and I would make sure neither of them walked away with anything, except consequences. The morning of the emergency hearing, my hands were cold, even though the courthouse air felt heavy and warm. I clutched the file my lawyer had helped me prepare: photographs, recordings, the investigator's report, all the pieces of the puzzle I had spent weeks piecing together. I told myself I was ready, but as soon as I stepped inside that room and saw them, my father pale but upright, Michael in the same navy suit he wore to our wedding, Vanessa in her cream blazer with that familiar tilt of her chin, my breath caught in my throat. The judge called us to order. Names were read. The purpose of the hearing stated my petition to cancel the Maple Street sale. When my lawyer began presenting the evidence, I kept my eyes on Vanessa. I wanted to see her face when the photographs of her and Michael came up. The ones taken outside the coffee shop in the quiet corner booth. Hands too close. Eyes locked in a way no stepmother and son-in-law should look at each other. The recording followed her voice low and clear. Before he's discharged, his daughter doesn't know. The courtroom seemed to tighten around us. Then the investigator's report showing every visit, every meeting, every overlap in their schedules, and the copies of the documents they'd filed using my father's hospital power of attorney paperwork that had nothing to do with his care and everything to do with transferring Maple Street. When my lawyer finished, my father's attorney asked him to speak. Dad's voice trembled at first but grew steadier. He said he had never not once agreed to sell Maple Street. He had no idea a sale was in motion, and if his signature appeared anywhere, it was under circumstances he hadn't understood when medication clouded his mind. Then right there in front of everyone, he looked at Vanessa and Michael and said, "I revoke any authority I ever gave you. From now on, Hannah speaks for me." The judge leaned forward, shuffled through the evidence, and in a tone that left no room for doubt, declared the sale null and void. The brokerage was ordered to return all related funds, and as my lawyer requested, the matter would be referred for criminal investigation into fraud and abuse of power of attorney. I didn't move. I didn't smile. Not yet. Weeks later, I got the call. Vanessa had been convicted of fraud, given a suspended sentence, ordered to pay full restitution, including every cent of my legal costs. Michael somehow avoided criminal charges, but his name was in the public case file now. His reputation, the one he guarded so carefully, was already collapsing. When I saw him next, he asked to talk. We stood in the shadow of the courthouse steps. He said he had known Vanessa before I came into the picture. That business had gone bad, money was owed, and she'd offered him a way out if he helped her manage Dad's assets. He said it wasn't supposed to go this far. He said he was sorry. He asked me to forgive him. I told him I didn't just lose a husband. I lost the man I thought I could trust to stand beside me when my father needed us most. I told him it was over. The divorce papers were already being prepared. As for Vanessa, I didn't visit, I didn't write. When the sentence came down, I sent her one line through her lawyer. "You didn't just lose my husband, you lost the thing you thought you'd already won." The day the case officially closed, I was behind the counter at the cafe. The morning rush had just ended. Sunlight poured through the front window, warm on my face. I scrolled through the court notice, one last time Maple Street, secure my father's name, clear Vanessa beginning her sentence. I set my phone down, inhaled slowly, and for the first time in months, the air didn't taste like fear. It tasted like freedom.